Hello. Thank you for joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on wherever you are. My name is Lauren Hogan. I work here at HomeAdvisor. I'm the digital manager. And today our hangout is about summer gardening tips, what you can do to keep your garden and your lawn looking its best. We have two experts with us today. We have Christina de Sevilla. I'll let her introduce herself.
Oh, I'm sorry. You
Right.
want me
No,
to jump
you're
in?
fine.
Okay. It's Christina da Silva, but the other one sounded very musical. I liked
Yeah,
it.
sorry.
I'm I am I'm the host of Ground Chat. Every Friday we have a live tweet chat about soil at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I have a blog which also deals with soil-related matters. So I approach gardening from a soil point of view. Um, Next person.
And then we have Sean James.
I am Sean James. I'm a graduate of the Niagara Park School of Horticulture. I have a small landscape company, Fern Ridge Landscaping. We do eco landscaping and the usual stuff as well. And we are very active on Twitter at Sean Fernridge. And we have a good time spreading information about how to garden in the best possible way and the best way for the environment.
Thank you. So during this discussion over the next half an hour, I'll be asking our panelists 4 questions. Feel free, if you're participating now, to submit a question that you would like our experts to answer for you. We have our Q&A app enabled below, and I'll try to push it into our conversation. If not, we've reserved about 5 minutes at the end to answer any questions. So we're going to go ahead and start with question number 1. How do you prepare your garden and lawn for the summer months and the heat? And please feel free to jump in however you guys would like to answer.
Okay, my first response to that, my first feeling was mulch, 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 because that way you not only reduce the amount of weeds you have in your garden, so you don't have as much work, but it also reduces the amount how much you have to water.
We actually cut down all of our gardens in the spring, and we mulch all that up on the grass, and then we put all that good organic matter back onto the garden, and then we mulch on top of that with a composted pine mulch, which is a mix of compost and pine bark, so it doesn't change the acidity of the soil. And not only does it keep weeds down and keep the soil cool, but again, it preserves moisture. And those are, I agree absolutely with Christina, that's the biggest part of it.
Okay, and perhaps as someone who is new to gardening, what is the purpose of placing the mulch in your garden?
Well, one of the big things that organic matter does, especially compost, not so much wood mulch in my opinion, but compost is going to promote the whole soil microbiome, all of the bacteria and fungi, and there are beneficial bacteria and fungi in the soil, and they're going to be able to help the plants uptake water. So obviously you're going to choose plants that are drought resistant so that you don't have to water as much. And ironically, you have to water them more for the first year to get them established. But after that, the compost is going to help the soil and all of the creatures that live in it be healthy so that they can help the plants uptake water and also be healthy, provide all the micronutrients that they need.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
Well, don't underestimate wood chips, though, even though that they are. Even the compost is the sexy cousin right now. The ugly cousin actually does quite a bit because as it breaks down, it really is the one that provides more of the food than the compost does. But compost is very, very good as well. And both are super, super, super for the soil structure, which is important. But as a beginner gardener, you go, soil structure, what is that? Why does it matter? But really, if you add the compost and or the mulch, what it does, it takes care of it, so you don't have to worry about what it is. Over the years, each time you use that, every spring, every summer, it just becomes better and better soil, and you don't have to take care of your garden as much. You'll have less problems in your garden. You don't have to water as much, etc., etc. It's just this one thing.
Wow, I actually did not know that. And kind of veering away from these questions I prepared, I'm a little bit curious about compost as well. So do you guys create your own compost? Do you purchase it? And if so, or if you do your own compost, how long does it take to be ready to use in your garden?
I say you take that, Sean.
Well, we do everything actually. We compost our own material, and that usually is about a 2-week turnaround,
Okay.
2-month turnaround, 2-month turnaround. We buy in the composted pine mulch, which is the bark mixed
Sure.
with the compost as well. And in addition to that, we also, as I said, we take all of the stuff that we cut down in the spring, mulch that, and put it back on, and then let Mother Nature do the composting. So we
Okay.
do everything that we can, and all the kitchen scraps go in a big rolling composter, so we don't attract pests. And that's about a year for us.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think the further south you go, the faster the composting is because they have more heat.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I have my own. I'm a backyard gardener. I'm not a landscaper. A huge operation like Sean. So what I have is a sort of a 3x2 composter, which I add stuff into.
uh-huh.
But it takes a long time. A lot of people say, "Oh, you know, it's easy. Two months, you've got it." No, it's really small, so it doesn't get as hot as it should. So it takes maybe up to a year before you get something you can use.
Okay.
And then if you don't do things like what I did, and here I am saying it as a soil expert, I didn't add enough water, and so it just sat there. And so it's in a really dry stuff. So there's lots of little things. It's not as it sounds easy. Nature does it all the time, but when you're trying to simulate it, you could forget one thing or two, and then it will take some time. It takes a little practice, but you can get. But anyone can do it eventually.
Yeah, because
I mean, I'm being realistic.
we have a compost in our backyard.
My wand and say it's easy, but I've run into problems.
It is a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. This is my garden that I'm using as a reference, and we have a 3-bin composter. So we fill the first bin, and when it's full, we turn that into the second bin. When the first bin's full, we turn the second bin into the third bin, and the first bin into the second bin. And when the first bin's full again, then the third bin's ready to go on the garden. So it's been as little as 2 months, and it's been as long as a year, but it's more us than the compost. And then if you're attentive to detail, and we're sort of laissez-faire, then you have to screen it as well, and that's a lot of work, but it really is worth it on several levels. You're keeping material out of the municipal facilities. You're not hauling material around with a diesel engine and mulching it up with a diesel engine. And in addition, you know what's in it. I've found with around here, the municipal compost has a lot of plastics and so on, bits and pieces of garbage. And I don't know what people have been putting on their garden that's ending up in the compost. So especially with my veggies, I feel much better using my own material.
Sean's absolutely right, 100%.
Sometimes I get lucky.
Oh,
So it's really great advice, guys, because actually my compost pile has just been sitting for about a year now, but we have not been adding water to it, Christina, so maybe that's a newbie mistake.
Well, what I did, mine was just sitting there, and so what I did is I took it all out and I layered it, the brown stuff and then the green stuff, the brown stuff and then the green stuff, and then added a bit of water, and it started to decompose after that. But before that, it was just sitting too, and I thought, oh, I thought this was easy, but that's that's what you have to do if you're not doing a lot. And you really need a fairly big pile for it to heat up and to decompose fast enough. If you've got a tiny little pile, it's not going to do very much.
Yeah, we have I think it's like a 3 foot by 3 foot, like pretty big bin, but I don't know, we haven't put water or been rolling it or.
Is it in full sun?
No, it gets sun in the afternoon for a couple hours.
The more sun it gets, the better it will do
Okay.
as well.
All right.
That'll help it heat up. If it's in the shade, then they don't work as well.
Okay, that's some good advice. Thank you, guys. So moving on to our second question, how do you maintain your garden and lawn throughout the summer? Might be a loaded question.
Sean.
What's that?
I said, should I go first or should you go first?
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm a lazy gardener. It's a fine line between lazy and efficient, and I'm not sure which side of it I skate on. But we do as little as possible. We fill the garden with as many plants as possible, and that keeps the weeds down. And then we leave everything standing through the winter for biodiversity, and also for the interest that it gives the gardens and the fact that it holds snow so it shelters the plants. Everything gets cut down in the spring, all of the perennial material, the leftover stuff. If it's already rotting into the soil, then I leave it. I'm going to mulch over it anyway. Only the weedy things get removed. We go through in the spring, we do a major weeding when we've cut stuff down, then we do our mulching, and then it's just a question of touching things up through the spring. I refer to it as refereeing, keeping plants from fighting too much with each other, and that seems to work pretty well. The only areas that are issues are where we're planting new plants or digging up and moving plants, and then they're going to need more spot watering. We try not to water the garden unless we're having something like a bus tour come through and then we want it all perky. We pretty much leave it to fend for itself. If a plant can't stand on its own, then we don't use it. Another important thing to consider is the plants that you choose. Instead of amending the soil very much, we choose plants that are going to handle the soil. We have very clay soil where I am, so we choose plants that tolerate clay soil. A lot of the trick to maintaining a garden is designing a garden properly in the first place, so that you don't have to fight with it forever. Choose the right plants for your zone, choose the right plants for the exposure and the shade, and choose the right plants for the soil. And then, if you're doing it right, then you'll make mistakes. We get too uptight about gardening. But if you're doing it right, then the rest is gravy.
Okay, the only thing I would add to that was that if you have a vegetable garden, that's when you really do have to water. That's the only exception.
Yeah.
You do have to, because vegetable gardens require a lot of feeding and they require a fair amount of watering to make them productive. And so that you would have to make sure that you're watering in the morning once you need to water it. In some places you don't have to water it every day, but when it starts getting dry. Containers, you'd need to water and fertilize those because they're going to dry out because they rely on you. Whereas in gardens, once you've set it up right, you don't have to do that. Vegetables, I tend to focus on feeding it organically. So I tend to either use manure or compost or anything like that, so that you're feeding it organically, so you're feeding yourself as well as possible. And with container gardeners, I tend to use this slow release at the beginning, so they have a little amount of fertilizer coming through, and then I use the liquid fertilizer every 2 weeks, because you've packed everything so close together, they will need more fertilization. And these are the flowering baskets and things like that. So those you treat a little differently from the gardens with your perennials and shrubs and trees. Those are more, you get closer to nature, where you don't have to interfere as much if you do it right, as Sean has outlined. The others, well, they're your babies.
Yeah.
Totally reliant on you.
I actually have a question regarding like a vegetable garden. So what is your recommendation for how many vegetables do you plant, and how closely? I mean, is it dependent upon space or where you live? I mean, how do you make those decisions?
Do you want me to jump in and say?
More veggie gardening than I do, so maybe do you want to field this one?
I will field this one.
All right.
I've been doing my own vegetable garden for a little while. And the spacing between different plants is really dependent on the vegetables that you're using.
Okay.
And that doesn't matter if you live in northern Canada or the southern states. It's all the same. It's the same kind of plant. Basically, what you're doing here with a lot of the vegetables, most of them are annuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
The peppers, the tomatoes, the broccoli. Broccoli is biennial, but that's just a little detail. You're eating the annual stuff. But you're basically growing everything up quickly in one season. So it's like growing your petunias or your geraniums. There's nothing more than that, really. We tend to make it more complicated, but really it's like growing a geranium. It needs a fair amount of food. It needs a fair amount of water. Well, not geraniums. Geraniums are very drought tolerant. But the amount, it really depends on what bigger family you're feeding and how much space you have.
Okay.
And always, always, always grow the things that you'll eat. I mean, Swiss chard sounds very exciting and they look very lovely, but I hate Swiss chard. I'll never grow it, never. And some people like to grow potatoes, for example, but potatoes take a lot of space. So unless you have a lot of space,
mm-hmm.
Forego the potatoes. Asparagus, I love asparagus. Those are an example of a perennial vegetable. So it comes back every year. Now, not only does it take 5 years before it's productive, but you need quite a lot of it before you get enough to feed yourself and your family. So if you have a small garden, forget the asparagus.
Okay.
But tomatoes, 2 tomatoes are enough. 2 tomato plants are enough for a family of 4. You don't need much more than that, unless you're making pasta.
Yeah.
And then you want to grow as many as possible so you can collect all those Roma tomatoes and you can boil them up at the end of this season, and then you can have pasta sauce for months and months and months. I have a few neighbors who do that. But I couldn't reserve my whole garden to tomatoes. I couldn't do it. I have beans, I have beets, I have a lot of lettuce. Lettuce you can actually grow fairly close together. You can just scatter it, and then as they start to grow, you can pick them out. So don't worry if you plant it too close. Then you can just take the ones that are growing too close, so you can give them more space.
Okay.
So don't worry about the fact that you've planted too close. Too bad. You just take them out, and then you can use them. If they're big enough, you can just pop them into a salad.
And so with lettuce too, you do you have to cut it at a certain time and harvest the lettuce, otherwise it goes sour? Am I correct in that?
Oh no. With the lettuce, it's what happens is that lettuce tends to bolt in the heat.
Okay.
Oh, so when it gets a certain temperature, when it gets really hot, it starts to flower. The best kind to grow is the leaf lettuce, so that you can pick every day if you wanted to, if you have enough of them. But then once it gets a certain amount of heat, they start to bolt. The best thing to do is seed every 2 weeks, so you have lettuce coming all the time.
Oh.
You got me thinking about 2 things.
Yeah.
One, I scatter my veggies in through the ornamental garden as well. So I find asparagus, for instance, to be a beautiful plant.
It is.
So that's in the ornamental garden, and we plant a lot of our other plants so that you get better biodiversity, a better chance of having a predator handy that's going to control any pests that you have. The other thing that we're doing, you mentioned, better plants for better nutrition for you. One of the reasons we started mulching the plants from the garden is because we have a lot of grasses and so on, and they have deep roots that reach down into the soil, bring up all the micronutrients. When you put that on the garden, then your plants are going to bring up the micronutrients, and you're mulching that in so that the vegetables that you're eating have better nutrition because they're more completely fertilized. You've got all the things like calcium and the weirder nutrients like molybdenum mixed in with your vegetables as well, if you have mixed in some of your deeper rooted organic matter from the year before. And that's kind of a handy thing. Same with tree leaves, mixing them into your compost and mixing them into your garden. Even just mulching them up and putting them on in the fall is going to give your vegetables more complete nutrition when you go to eat them and harvest them.
And some people are recommending using, there's a few products that have come out in the market where it's ground up rocks, minerals,
yeah.
and they're using that. Some are, I think it's called green sand, and they mix it up with their soil so you can get as many trace nutrients as you can naturally.
Okay. I'm like taking notes right now.
Oh. I'm sorry about my dog was barking. Someone kept ringing the bell. I could ignore them.
It's all right. Next thing, R2D2 will go off. It'll be like a musical.
I muted that. If you're in the right part of the country, then you can get seaweed as well. And it has every nutrient in the world. It dissolved in the oceans is absorbed in the seaweed. So by putting that on as a mulch, as a compost, then again you're giving more complete nutrition to the plant, and therefore your food will have more complete nutrition. When we look at factory farming, they deplete the soil and they really only give it nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Exactly.
When you're gardening more holistically and using sort of Mother Nature as a guide, then your food will be better for you and your family.
And what areas of the country would you have to be for seaweed? Are you thinking like if it's in proximity to you, like if on the coast?
Yeah.
Or okay.
You can actually even get little bottles of seaweed.
Oh.
True.
Yeah, it's all liquefied. It only smells a little bit.
You just put it outside right away anyway.
Fish smells a heck of a lot more.
So we actually have a question from Peter Ban. He's been pretty patient. And he's asked, any tips on a simple and effective way to stop newly spread dandelion whiteheads from germinating while not inhibiting the growth of new grass?
Ooh.
I know.
Corn gluten is out.
This kind of leads into our next question, so I thought it was the appropriate time.
Well, most weeds need light to germinate. People think a lot about fertilizing their lawn, and I don't do that at all. We often add half an inch of compost in the spring, and that grass likes to be covered to germinate, and weeds like to be open to the sun to germinate, which is why it's good to keep your grass 2.5 inches tall, because that helps shade the weeds as well. So by composting after the dandelions have done their seeding, then that should help keep the dandelions from germinating. Nothing is 100% proof, and here we have a pesticide ban, so we can't use any chemicals, and that's a good thing, a very good thing. We're seeing far more birds and butterflies and biodiversity, so that's great. But composting is going to help stop the dandelions from germinating.
And you have to remember, if you add anything that will kill the germinating dandelions, it's also going to affect your germinating grass seed. So you don't do it.
However, if you were to overseed in the fall, then that's going to allow your grass seed to germinate.
Yeah. And
then you could try something like corn gluten, which I don't know if I have a lot of faith in the spring.
Some people believe in it, and some it doesn't seem to work at all. It's very expensive.
And is this putting gluten?
You apply it like you would a fertilizer. It goes on the surface of the lawn, and then it spreads, and it's supposed to, partly through physical means and partly through chemical means, it stops germination of seeds.
Okay. And I feel like this is something that probably needs to be addressed, but I've come across, like on Pinterest more specifically, people suggesting that you use baking soda and vinegar to get rid of weeds.
What people have to remember is that those are going to kill everything. I've seen ads for the product that show people, it's sort of an animated thing, and they're neatly killing the weed and not the grass, but it doesn't work like that. They're non-selective. They're going to kill everything. And also what you've got to remember, we've gotten away from chemicals, but a lot of these things aren't just because it's natural doesn't mean it's better. If you use vinegar, you're killing everything in the soil column. And I don't think that that's necessarily a better way to do it. And nobody wants to hear this, but I am getting used to the weeds. My neighbor paid me to pull the violets out of his lawn and then looked over the fence somewhat mystified as I planted them in mine. Because I'm getting away from the pure turf idea. I eat the dandelions. I'm learning to see the beauty in other things and get away from the idea of the pure turf.
But if you like the idea of pure turf, because I'm all for choice, the best way really is keep your lawn tall, 2.5 inches to 3 inches, and that will prevent a lot of other things coming through. And when the dandelions do come through, just go through with and manually take them out. That's the most effective way.
Agreed.
Okay. And Peter actually asked another question previously, and perhaps we've answered some of this, but we might as well address it. So he asked, is it okay to use weeds to mulch your garden? And if so, how can you tell when the weeds are too far along to be used?
This one's an easy one.
Yeah.
It really depends on the weed. Some weeds you can, if you actually put your weed, some you can take out and you don't have to worry that they're going to reroot somewhere else. But others you would have to worry about. But most of them you can just put on the top of the soil and they'll dry out. But you need to do it before they start to seed. If you start to see a flowering and up, forget it. Because if you have some seed, you're just adding seed to your lawn. And you don't want to do that. You're just compounding your problem. But I totally believe in, if you get weeds, use them. Yay. But don't put them in your compost unless they get hot enough. Otherwise, you end up adding a seed problem to your compost.
That's some good advice. And you have to welcome Sarah,
Hello,
our
Sarah.
guest star, a.k.a. Handy Helen.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for joining us. So we're tackling our third question, kind of rolling into this, but the third question is, what preventative measures do you take to stop weeds? And maybe we've kind of discussed this, Sean. It sounds like you let them grow.
Well,
You mulch, so you don't have a weed problem.
Yeah.
And then the following question is, what preventative measures do you take to stop critters from ruining all your efforts in your garden?
Oh, that's a good question.
So who wants to start?
I'll start.
Right.
I have squirrels in my backyard, and they're a real problem. I live right next to a green space, and we get squirrels coming over. They actually spend their winter vacations here. They get into they try and get into the holes and stuff, and spend the winter in your house.
Mm-hmm.
And they also like to feed in your garden. We also have raccoons. Raccoons are a big problem as well here in Ontario. Mine is an unconventional approach. I have a dog who chases squirrels and raccoons, and it really keeps them all out. It really does. I have very little damage. My neighbor across the street who doesn't have a dog, he rarely gets to his tomatoes. He rarely gets to his cherries because they're all picked. But I never have a problem because I have a dog that actually chases them. But there are issues with having a dog too. Like everything has to be raised, so it's not a foolproof one. That's my
Yeah, that's your approach.
I've had a few interesting experiences. We're really big into biodiversity. So the little critters, the more you encourage the birds, the more pests are going to be taken care of. The more you allow nature to take its course. I get aphids, but aphids don't get out of control because I have lots of ladybugs and hoverflies and all those sorts of cool and predatory pollinators as well. So insects don't ever become a problem here. Slugs don't become a problem here. None of that gets out of control. Even Japanese beetle on this site doesn't get out of control. I heard a neat thing for the squirrels a little while ago, and she says she's having great success. I said, why do you have a rubber snake in your garden? And she said, well, the squirrels kept digging up the garden to plant their nuts and so on. And she moves the snake around every now and then, and I guess the squirrel thinks it might be real. I don't know if that works in the long term. The Winnipeg Parks Department, to deal with deer and rabbit eating their tulips and so on, they spray on a mixture of 1 liter of water, 2 cups of milk, 2 eggs, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and 2 tablespoons of soap. And that most of it is about sticking and spreading, helping it stick to the plants. But to us, it doesn't smell like anything, but to the deer and the rabbits, it smells like rotten eggs. And that works very well. And then finally, there's companion planting. If you have onions near the tasty stuff, then they're less likely to be eaten.
I found that chicken poo tends to work very well to keep squirrels away.
Really?
The little pelletized things, I never have any problems. They never dig up any of my bulbs.
Huh. Wow. Is it the smell, you think?
No, these ones don't. They're dry, they're tiny. You sprinkle them on top. It works way better than the dried blood thing. The dried blood, once it rains, it's gone, and bingo, they're back there.
At least that provides iron, though, too. Like a lot of these things have multiple purposes. So the chicken poop would be a fertilizer. The blood meal provides iron. The whole biodiversity thing just makes the garden a nicer place to be. If you've got butterflies and birds. Also, I think in a deeper sense, why do we like butterflies and birds in the garden? Maybe it's because if there's lots of life around, then in the primitive part of our brain, we feel, if they feel safe, then we can feel safer. It's like having water in the garden. There's all sorts of scientific explanations. The sound is nice, but it's such an important part of our life. If we can hear water, then that primitive part of our brain can relax just a little bit more and feel more at ease in the world. So I think many of these, the more holistic solutions, have more than one benefit.
Yeah. And Sarah, do you have any? I think you just came from your garden. I don't know if we can hear you or you can hear us, but do you have any, I don't know, any input on this? Or what you use in your garden?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh, no. Yeah, we can't hear her.
You have to sign.
You should just have her write it down. Well, unfortunately, I wish I scheduled this hangout for an hour because I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about. I know I'm really interested in hearing more advice from you guys. But our half an hour is up. While some of our viewers have remained with us, I think it's time to kind of sum it up. And I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to share your knowledge with us today. I know I have a couple things I'm going to go home and work on. I hope that the viewers have something to go home and work on. Everyone has something that they took away from this conversation. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
You've given us the venue to cause us to talk and cause us to talk. Well.
Yeah.
Allow us to talk and share.
I know. I really wish I scheduled this for an hour. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and stop our broadcast and throw us back into the green room. So thank you.
Thanks very much.